Welcome back, everyone, as we power into what I personally think is one of the most interesting applications of AI, which is the application of AI to identity. I spent a lot of time thinking about this. I even put together a book on the subject with two collaborators called Trust Data. I think identity is incredibly important. So we will hear about the power of AI for real identity verification. And I'm going to invite to the stage Dan Rosen from Commerce Ventures, who will introduce his panel, who will also join him on the stage now. Come on up, Dan. I guess we're going first.
Wherever you like. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here. So I have the privilege of doing quick introductions here. Maybe just say a couple words before we get started. My name is Dan Rosen. I'm the founder and general partner of Commerce Ventures. We're a venture capital firm, obviously. We invest in infrastructure for what we call the commerce continuum. So think about the way that consumers shop, spend, save, and secure their financial lives. That's the type of technology companies that we're investing in. Across this continuum, we see, obviously an enormous need for digital identity verification. Obviously, digital commerce and digital financial services requires it. We're going to talk a little bit about that today. To date, we've invested in over 50 companies across that continuum, and one of them, we're honored to say, is Socure. So happy to be here, but also a little bit biased, I guess. But with that, I'd really love to introduce our panel. So immediately to my right is Dr. Arif Ahmed. He's SVP of Emerging Payments and Technology Innovation at US Bank. To his right is Sunil Madhu, who is the co-founder and chief strategy officer at Socure. And taking us at the very end, taking us to the panel is Frank Villavicencio. Frank is the Chief Product Officer for Access and Identity at ADP. Many of you probably get paid via his company. So with that, I'm going to let you guys introduce yourselves. Maybe give just a minute on your background and what you focus on in your companies.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I'm Senior Vice President of focusing on emerging payments and tech innovation. So we've been looking at multiple areas. I mean, we explore new areas, from mobile payments to Alexa and Google Assistant to now AI and machine learning. Right? So a broad area of exploration.
Yeah.
My name is Sunil Madhu. As Dan said, I founded Socure. It's my sixth startup in this industry. I've been in it for 23 years. And in my past ventures, I've helped establish standards for Identity Federation, access management, governance, risk, and compliance.
Thank you. Frank Villavicencio. I manage the access and identity platform that powers all of our products at ADP. Like Don said, we pay on average 1 out of every 6 people in the US. And across the board, we onboard about 1 million or so identities every month. So it's a high volume, high assurance, high sensitivity operation for us.
Great, thanks guys. Okay, Sunil, I'm going to ask you this question because I know you know the answer. So obviously AI is a buzzword, and in my line of work, a lot of my brethren have been investing loads of capital into companies that we would broadly call artificial intelligence startups. M&A in the space has been through the roof. Can you just tell us what is AI? Talk a little bit about artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning. What do these terms mean? Try to keep it brief, just so that we can get into the panel. But I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing the second age of the hype of AI. The first was in the 1980s. AI is just a collective term for a bunch of tools, algorithms, computational, mathematical techniques that allows machines to make decisions like people, artificially intelligent decisions. And so if you imagine that's a Venn diagram, that's the outermost circle. And the subset of tools within AI that leads to machines learning are called machine learning tools, and that's an inner circle in the Venn diagram. And the innermost circle within that circle is deep learning, and that specifically refers to one of the bag of tools in machine learning which is neural networks. And the word deep was coined by a Google engineer, which referred to the depth of the layers inside the neural network. Today, when a lot of people talk about AI, it's really a buzz around the advancements in neural networks and expert systems. So it's kind of synonymous now with, deep learning techniques.
So I think it's probably fair to say your job is to be able to explain the answer to this question, which is, why does that matter? And as it pertains to identity verification, why is it better? Why is AI better than a rules-based approach that might be more traditional?
Good question. The main difference is that rules-based systems, while they're easy for humans to understand, are limited in that these rules look back in time. They can protect you from things that have happened in the past if they happen again in the future. AI, by the nature that it learns, doesn't just protect you from the past, it learns from the past, but AI systems can protect you from things you've never seen in the future that might be a threat. And it can do that accurately and fast and quickly because you're dealing with so much data now. We refer to data lakes these days. And it's very difficult for human beings to operate off that much data and to sort of tease out patterns of correlations. But machines can do that. So that's really the main difference, the learning part.
Learning matters. Frank, maybe you can just give us a sense for what brought you to the stage. Why did you think about how did you think about this problem and this opportunity, and why AI might be important for you guys?
Well, our volume is about 1 million or so in January, which is the heaviest volume. It's 1.7 million people that we have to onboard. And we try to do that in a way that balances convenience or user experience with security. If we do too much security, too much friction, we turn off and we lose business. If we do it too leniently, then we allow bad guys in, and that leads to fraud. So I'm looking for the optimization of those two variables. And what we have learned is that at the velocity at which all of the fraudsters, all the different schemes are evolving, a rule-based system or a policy-based system is just not sufficient. On the one hand, you can think about your rules and define them, but then end up adding a lot of friction. In the industry, there is this technique used commonly, knowledge-based authentication, or KBA. From a usability perspective, our stats are horrendous. You look at dropping about 20% of your users, adding at least 3 more minutes to the enrollment process. It's a horrible experience. And arguably, we're not getting any better at curtailing fraud. So we look at AI as an opportunity to balance that, optimize it a lot better. And so far, the data is encouraging, meaning you can better predict attack vectors and fraud potential without having to invest a battalion of people optimizing rules and hoping they do it at the right time to prevent fraud.
Arif, you must think about this as well. Coming from one of the largest banks in the country, can you talk about what brought you to thinking about this identity problem? How do you think about it, and why is now a time to be considering using artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so we actually, at least I did not think that I'd be here talking about identity because I took a very circuitous path, right? I was in 90s, I was in school and taking AI classes, then moved into banking and all that later on, and now here I am, right? And 6-7 years back, I joined US Bank, and US Bank was on the forefront of mobile onboarding, mobile app onboarding, right? I can say probably there was no one there at that time who was using mobile for co-brand onboarding. So that was, and that was great. So, and we, over time, we start seeing, as we see some fraud or risk, we would put controls and realize, just like you, that, as we put more control, customer experience becomes worse and worse, right? And so at the same time, about 2.5 years ago, I'm part of innovation, so we started experimenting with innovation around AI and machine learning and conversational interaction and anomaly detection, recommender system. But when we were doing that, we realized one thing, that anomaly detection, it could be a very good tool. I wasn't thinking from the fraud perspective, from the customer experience perspective, right? If we can reduce the hiccups, the controls, without risking, right? Without increasing the risk. So how can I have my cake and eat it too, right? That was the problem, right? And market inefficiencies and industry inefficiencies were there, and you could see that you can actually have your cake and eat it too, right? So I actually started, so as a bank, we started focusing on that. We learned through that experiment that number one, as I said, for anomaly detection, it's very effective. Number two, that Peter Norvig's dictum is true, that more data is always better, right? And if I had more data and suboptimal algorithm compared to an optimal algorithm with less data, I'll take more data, right? And number three, that there's a lot of hype around AI, but when people are talking, their aspiration and fears are actually around artificial general intelligence. We did not have artificial general intelligence then. We do not have AGI now.
Right. Generalized artificial intelligence.
Artificial general.
Sentience.
Right. On the other hand, we are in an era of artificial narrow intelligence. Right. What that means that we do very well in image detection, we do very well in voice today.
Right.
But that requires, and I'm saying all this nitpicking because there's a reason. Because when you are in ANI, artificial narrow intelligence era, you have to collaborate. That means you have to bring algorithm experts, data experts, and domain experts together, right? And that's the lesson we learned, and then we operationalize that. That means we start working with the industry, we brought our domain expert, we formed agile teams to solve the problem, and it has worked very well for us.
Great, okay. Well, you both mentioned a couple of different benefits that you think you can realize, or business goals you think you can realize leveraging machine learning or artificial intelligence in the identity area. I was surprised that you both mentioned user experience before you mentioned fraud prevention. Yep. So curious, do you view one as being a bigger, sort of problem or more important business goal than the other, or are they really hand in hand where you kind of have to satisfy both and have your cake and eat it too, so to speak? Frank, maybe you can.
I don't know that you can favor one without the other in this day and age. I mean, I think you're out of the game if you're thinking about one versus the other, or not thinking about a very good balance. For us, it's crucial. When you think about, we tend to think about real people. I know we talk about identity verification, but real people who depend on that paycheck or that benefit that week. And if their identity is stolen, it's a severe, catastrophic failure. So we pay a lot of attention to this. So empathy, I guess, to paraphrase, user experience is integral to the solution. Now, we also realize that this is a journey. There are problems where we believe today machines are better equipped than humans to tackle. And I think in this case, fraud prevention or a predictor of fraud, I think we're at a point where machines are getting a lot better than humans. So expecting people to do the analysis and come up with amazing policies that don't need to change over time is just no longer feasible.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that, to say, one refers to top line, right? Every business from now to forever depends on customers and how many customers you sign up. And the customers are getting more and more impatient because every generation is mobile first. If you don't get them in there within one click, they leave. If you make them come back 2 days later, they're not going to be there. So if you want to grow top line, well, you got to care about acceptance. And then, fraud reduction is a nature of the world, right? It's a cost that you kind of have to minimize.
Yeah, and maybe before we move on, and knowing your stats on this topic, I think it's worth just sharing, if you can, without talking about a specific customer. How much value can you deliver in terms of using AI, improvements in either user experience, so like, more approvals, whatever, or just fraud reduction? Like, can you just talk about what's possible?
Sure. There are three sides of the triangle. Acceptance, letting good people in, that's one side, and that relates purely to the accuracy of the system of false positives. The other is basically fraud rate, and that's the bad guys coming in. And the third is manual review. because we often augment these systems with thousands of people doing manual work. And traditionally, we were only able to optimize for any 2 of the 3 sides of this triangle. With AI, you can optimize for all 3. So if you look at acceptance as an example, in the industry, for every 1 bad guy you catch, you're rejecting up to 5 good people for the wrong reasons. With AI, for every 3 bad people you stop, you reject 1 bad person. That's a significant top-line revenue growth item. It's on the bottom part, it's about 30% improvement. On the upper end of it, it can be as much as 85%.
Okay.
Right. In terms of fraud, we've had customers basically say that after they employed our AI solution, fraud just fell off the cliff. They looked back the last quarter and there was 1 fraud. So these are orders of magnitude better improvements.
Yeah, so I mean, it's a very important point. I mean, the one thing is that I was reading about this, actually I was talking to someone about a bank in the Middle East, right? So there's a requirement over there for KYC that you have to have face-to-face, right, during the process. So someone actually applies for it, and last minute there's a video chat, right? And I'm thinking how powerful that could be, right? I mean, the thing is, it's customer experience. Customer is not only talking, whether to a person or in future a chatbot, right? But at the same time, you're collecting the facial recognition, voice and all that, right? So it's not that you give up anything, it's how you bring it all together. That's why I think there are so much inefficiencies in the industry that you can have both.
Absolutely. If I could just add a little bit of color. So for us, it's interesting because while we sort of play in the consumer space, our business model is business to business. So the expectation is not that you would drop anyone off. We can't. People are paying us to service this user base. Is really how effective are we in letting them in? And so our metrics are slightly different in the sense that, abandonment is severe for us in that you have to call, and that call is extremely expensive. And we know that by the time someone calls us because they can't register, we're already at a red in terms of business.
So I'm curious for the executives from 2 large corporates here. There's probably a lot of folks who are product and technology experts in the audience. It sounds as though you're fairly technical. Did you think about how much you guys could do yourself in terms of harnessing these technologies for the benefits that we talked about? How do you think about that trade-off of build it in-house, kind of work, kind of with best-in-class, third-party vendors? Just curious for your guys' perspectives.
So as I mentioned, in my rant for A&I, right? You need collaboration because you can't be good at everything, right? And so you need the data is somewhere because it is the data that you need. Sometimes you need raw data from your own systems, and that's a challenge, right? You could have multiple groups there, and the data could be spread out. And then you have to figure out how to get the data from external parties. Sometimes it is raw, and sometimes it is scored, like Socure does. It is the combination of all that you cannot do everything. But the way we are doing it is, the concept of a signal hub or data hub. Looking at that, right? Bringing internal and external signals together, and some of them are raw, some of them are scored, and then using our machine learning technique to further enhance.
Right, I agree with that. For us, this is interesting, a realization that maybe many of us already have made, and that is, many banks spend average of maybe $40–60 a year on KYC for the very same person that we need to onboard. So we think this idea of signals is powerful, not only because we can get better predictors of fraud, but if you think about the user experience, for example, if you happen to do online banking and you can use the same experience to onboard yourself into other services like ours, now you're getting both. And we benefit from the fact that many banks are already solving this and enrich the experience altogether.
Yeah, so I think the fundamental difference between the technology base today and 10, 15 years ago is that the thing that we bought 10 years ago that sits inside our own company, well, that's exposed to just your company's experiences. And to your point, the whole notion of AI is about collaborative filtering, collective intelligence. You want to protect yourself against the threats that you may face, but also against the ones that your peers in the industry may face as well. So bringing all of those experiences together into an AI makes that AI very intelligent, not just protecting you, with the things that you're used to defending against, but all these new attack surfaces that are emerging all the time.
Awesome. So I want to come back to this, kind of collaboration discussion. I think we'll, maybe have time to discuss it a little bit. I have a few kind of what I call fast pitch questions, just to I'm curious kind of how you guys think of these different topics. So maybe I'll just run through this. If you guys can just answer in one word each one of these, I think that'll lead to a little bit more interesting discussion on some of these topics. In 3 years, how will customers' reliance on or usage of digital interfaces compare to today? This is a softball.
Yeah, that'd be, I see a lot of growth, right? And that's why we are so focused on it.
Yeah, with IoT around the corner, we're just going to produce even more sensor data, so it's just going to grow. Yeah,
there would be no other way. You have to do it digitally, 100%.
So assuming that's the case, and again, I kind of assumed that would be your answer. How is the digital identity verification problem? Is that going to be, kind of the same problem we're dealing with today? Will it be substantially worse? Just give me a sense for kind of same, worse, much worse. Where are we headed?
I think it's going to be a chicken and mouse thing. Right? Oh, cat and mouse thing, sorry. Cat and mouse thing, because we will continue to do that, right? Because fraudsters are going to evolve, and we will have to evolve. Yes. So I think we'll be in a very different place, but we'll still be fighting it, right?
Yeah, I'd agree. Technological complexity makes people's fraud vectors sort of become more creative, right? So I think over time the problem is going to get worse. But the interesting thing is the evolution of AI and getting feedback from the industry rapidly are making these tools much smarter. So hopefully we'll close the economic gap, because what really matters today to stop fraud is that you want to change the economics of fraud against the fraudster. And today it's totally in their favor. They can buy any of our stolen identities of the web for $4 and then use it to attack 100 banks and turn that $4 investment into tens of thousands of dollars in fraud losses. So it's wholly in their favor. And unless we start using AI and all of these different types of rich data sources to connect the dots, we aren't going to be able to change those economics against them.
Right. For me, it's a permanent state of optimization. So there's no steady state. As we get better in one area, the fraudsters will find another vector, right, and we will continue. So I think this is just a steady state. It's a permanence of optimization.
Frank, you mentioned this earlier. Do you believe in the near future, next 3-4 years, that machines will be able to completely replace humans for identity verification?
That's a tough question. I think that there will be a high percentage of the process that will be purely digital. Yes. Look, I'll give you a different parallel, not only for fraud, but if you look at HCM, the trend now for even hiring is to involve agents to make better predictions of who would be a good candidate for a specific job, and that helps us remove diversity issues, inclusion issues, and biases. So it's already proven to be better than humans at basic problems like that. So there's a high likelihood that the majority of these flows will be all pure digital.
I would agree with that assessment. I think there's going to be fewer people. I don't think we'll ever eliminate people from the mix, but there'll be fewer people, definitely.
Correct.
Great. So I know we touched a little bit on consortia. It does seem as though this identity is a problem that kind of everybody should be working together on in defense of the good guys should be working together because the bad guys certainly are.
Yes.
Maybe to anybody who wants to answer it, kind of where are we with respect to consortia? Are there a number of these out there that are kind of working on kind of efforts to defend people's identities?
I'll take a stab at that. So in the U.S., there are some initiatives that are definitely bubbling up. Globally, there are already quite a few that's established. So in the US, for example, the telecom companies are trying to work on Project Verify, which is a soft device-based token, a single factor, if you will, like a Facebook ID or an OpenID Connect project. That's one initiative. If you look globally, for example, there's the initiative from the GSMA, which is the global mobile operator industry group, called Universal Profile, which is part of the rich communication standards that are now going to creep in around the world. The things that you can do in WeChat, payments and everything else without ever leaving the chat system, that is now becoming genericized in the telecom network, so that no matter what messenger client you use, you can actually have those rich services, including payment streams. And they're trying to create a universal kind of utility for identity there as part of that. And then there are government initiatives, and so that in Eastern Europe, for example, for lack of credit, there's Bank ID, which is a trusted ID. Canada also has a similar initiative where the top, I think, 4 banks or 5 banks that exist in Canada have combined together. So there are lots of different types of consortia, but they are collaborating with the private sector because building is very difficult for them, especially in this landscape, fast changing. So they usually embed a lot of private sector technology into these frameworks that they're building.
Arif, do you think it's the bank's role to verify identity, not just for themselves, but also as a certificate authority, so to speak, or an identity authority for other people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a possibility. I mean, the way I see it, I mean, you remember that you put your cash, like for hundreds of years, you put your cash with the banks and your privacy, you trust them, right? You trusted them then, and then slowly that cash digitized, right? It's bits and bytes that banks have, right? You still trust them, it's your valuable that banks have. So I personally think that banks are the natural inheritor, right? In this space, right? Whether it's a one bank or consortia, because that's what they do. They protect valuable digital assets and privacy, right?
But Arif, I would counter that in actually 2003 or 2004, Citigroup actually tried this themselves to bring the banks together. I think that the fundamental problem is not one of technology there, it's liability ownership.
Yes. No, that's true. But see, the time, sometimes people are ahead of their time, right? So they have some, you can come up with the technology way before then, right? I mean, Palm did something, then, earlier on. And so I think that timing is also critical, right? So I think the time may be right. But, I don't know where it's going to go. But I'm just, I think that banks could do it, yeah.
I think about this problem as a multifaceted one. So even in the example of the bank being, I agree, banks in general play a very important role in brokering that initial trust. But then after that, there are different players. So I'll give you an example, and we're collaborating in consortium where these are actual use cases. You go apply for credit somewhere. Well, at some point in that process, you would want to know income and employment history. I'll argue that banks are probably not the right place to go get that information. You may want to know addresses or coordinates to contact. Maybe telcos are better suited for that. So I think about this more as a mosaic. If collaboration really happens, then you get the aggregate of multiple players.
As a vendor, I'm going to speak in self-interest here because I don't think it's the capability of most of these customers here in the audience to go play the game of, go get the right vendor mix every year to go figure out what gives you the best returns. And that's the advantage the companies like us have. Because we bring in a variety of data from a multitude of data sources, many of them overlapping often, to produce the best signal. Because no single vendor in the market, data broker, whatever, bureau, no single vendor has 100% coverage or accuracy.
100%.
So we solve that problem.
Yeah, agreed. Don't necessarily talk about the implementation, but the principle is that you get better at predicting or preventing fraud, making the user experience more pleasant as you aggregate this signal.
Right.
Great. Well, I know we're running out of time. I actually wanted to ask one more question, but I don't think we have time for it. So I think the summary is fewer humans involved, much more digital. A lot of data, using AI to really take that data and deliver real results that are both relating to customer experience, but also reducing fraud and preventing fraud. And
tangible results.
Tangible results, and a lot of collaboration.
The reason that fewer humans, I would say that those humans will be deployed for better customer experience, right? Creating better. It's not like I still think that the AI is there to augment, humans, not replace it.
Yep. Great. Well, thank you guys for the panel. I appreciate it. Thanks everybody for being here.